And they describe the inside of this thing.
What?
I think, going back to our first conversation, what they're describing is the inside of the moon. That there is what we might call, using the Soviet language, a psychotronic control system, a kind of spectral technology inside of the moon, which is impinging on and manipulating humans in the afterlife state.
What?
And it's not omnipotent.
Yeah.
It's not a flawless system. So it's possible to assert your free will and self-determination in the face of this system, but it's very difficult. So a lot of people who've had near-death experiences, for example, they describe being pulled toward this light. It's like they couldn't resist going into the light.
Yeah.
They tried in some cases, but it was almost as if it was an electromagnet, like pulling them into it.
Sure.
And then when they go into the light, one of the most common things that's described is that people are shown their dead relatives and religious authority figures, like Jesus. And, or like if you're a Hindu, you see Hindu gods, interestingly. I'll give you a terrifying case from a Hindu in a minute. So you're pulled into this light, and then they show you your dead relatives, and they show you Jesus and whatever. Well, here's the problem, Jesse, is that if you look at Dr. Ian Stevenson's extremely rigorous research on reincarnation that he did at the University of Virginia for decades on children's spontaneous memories of past lives, all the cases show that the average interval between death and reincarnation is something like, it could be anywhere from 6 months to 3 years maximum. It's usually not more than several years. So when you are having a near-death experience and your grandmother, and let's say you're in your 60s in your 60s, and you see your grandmother who died when you were in your 20s, that's bullshit. You are being shown an artificially generated simulacrum of your dead relatives to manipulate you by a psychotronic technology.
This is getting
by a psychotronic technology.
You really think that?
Yes, I do.
Really?
And I say that as someone who was, at the bedside, at the deathbed of a couple of my relatives who were experiencing these things. When people are very close to death, they also see dead relatives come around their hospital beds. Very commonly reported. And so one case was my great aunt, or I was there while she was like not describing to us, she was having conversations with dead relatives that, the other family members knew, oh, that's so-and-so, she's talking to so-and-so, as if he's like in the hospital room. And the most striking case was with my own grandmother, my Persian grandmother, to whom I owe the fact that I fluently speak Persian, because both of my parents worked when I was growing up, and they would leave me with her during the days, and she hardly spoke any English. So I learned like Persian practically as my first language in New York. So I was very close to my grandmother, and when she was dying, this exact thing happened. She starts talking to my dead grandfather. Now, my Persian grandfather died when my father was 4, okay? That guy reincarnated 60, 70 years ago. So she's talking to something that's being projected into our mind psychotronically.
But how do you know it's being projected psychotronically and it's not just a function of her own old age and sort of
Sure. I mean, that's the conventional skeptical response. I would say, based on what Robert Monroe described in terms of the terrain of the afterlife through his astral projections, which then other people at the Monroe Institute were able to replicate, and based on the kinds of accounts that, let's say, Carla Turner got from abductees of being taken to places that were not just like, like space alien bases. There were places where the soul was being handled as some kind of an informational matrix and or energy source.
John Lear would say that there's like a soul catcher on the moon, but he was kind of crazy and would say a lot of stuff that, probably was BS.
I guess my point is we don't need to I've heard that, by the way. I've heard him talk about that. My point is we don't need to depend on him. Other people have said this. And let me give you one more example of somebody who's described this is, I hope I don't get this name wrong. Scott Turner or Scott Trevor or Scott Turner was a leader of a team of remote viewers. And these are private sector remote viewers. I think of the kind who offer corporate services and stuff like that. who did a remote viewing on the word moksha. Moksha. So what was in the envelope was moksha, the target they were blind to. Moksha means liberation in Sanskrit. It's like how you get out of the wheel of samsara. And so he does this session with his team. And long story short, he comes back with this horrific account that all of them do. Of course, they're all working the same target, blind to the same target, and they're all doing this independently. And then they compare notes. And they said that you can't achieve moksha because as you try to escape the earth, there's something that grabs you and bends you back toward the earth. Like if you're a ray of light, it's like it bends the light that's your soul back toward the earth, like a what do you call them? A lensing effect. And he said it's originating from some celestial body near the earth, and that it is part of a vast machinery of energy extraction, which was set up in our solar system at the end of a war that devastated the solar system. He said that like millions of years ago, there were these horrendous people who wanted to establish this energy harvesting system here and wanted to exploit humanity for this purpose. And there was a rebellion against them, and the conflict was waged across the entire solar system. Now, this is interesting in terms of what we discussed regarding Mars in our first conversation and the apparent devastation of Mars in some kind of a nuclear war, according to Dr. Brandenburg. So Turner and his group said, Turner, Trevor, Scott, whatever, this remote viewer, it's going to be in my new book, Thanosis. But you can find it. Google remote viewing moksha. People were so disturbed by the video that the guy took it down. He has all his other videos up, but he took this one down, but other people uploaded it to other sites. And so he says the rebels who wanted to like preserve human freedom and self-determination, didn't want humans to be harvested and exploited this way, they lost the war. And ever since then, we've been inside basically this prison where we are spiritually manipulated and harvested for our energy.
When we originally described this site, it's a fence or a grid around a place. This acts as a barrier. It collects and traps people, things, or objects. This is actually an innocent planet that is being used in an unintended way. And this meters the flow and acts as a checkpoint and an access point for an external force. One viewer described it as similar to hocus pocus in a way of its energetics that the viewer wasn't familiar with. And it's occurring on a crowded planet. It's a deliberate function that acts as a cage. People have been dispersed here, and a form of perverted injustice is occurring. A third viewer described it as a large naturally formed object, like a planet, that acts as an animal pen. This is a refugee camp tucked away out of sight, and a magnetic force. It stirs, agitates, and it works in a cylindrical manner, like clockwork over a long expanse of time. In my session, my work described a planetary system that's extremely crowded and jammed. Ghostly voices are flooding into this place, and it's incredibly harrowing for them. It's a bone-chilling experience. As a viewer, when I remote viewed this, I had descriptions that it made me upset in the session. It elicited contempt for what was going on at the site. But the activity at the site was this concept of a net that's been spun. And it's an operation of catch and release on a grand scale. So there's a massive grid that exists around this planet. And it acts as a checkpoint, a waypoint or a rest stop where souls are drained, and then that in turn energizes something else.
That's so depressing. I mean, is there any aspirational streak within that? Do you believe in God? Do you think
I believe in Prometheus. Okay. In other words, the reason that Prometheus has become such a central archetype to my philosophical project is because if you look at the structure of this myth, it encompasses all the major elements of most religious belief systems, but in a way that's empowering to humanity. So for example, in the Promethean myth, we're not created by Yahweh or by Enlil or by whatever celestial tyrant wants to loosh harvest us. We're created by this genius, like artistic spirit who rebelled against Zeus, right? Because he thought Zeus was a sadistic tyrant. And we're created by him in his image to be a race of new gods. And the only reason that we don't wind up fulfilling that destiny is that Prometheus is punished by Zeus, right? And chained in the Caucasus and has his liver devoured. What does the devouring of the liver mean? The liver was used for fortune telling by the ancient Greeks. It was like crystal ball gazing. So they believed that they could read the future by looking into the blackness of the liver by candlelight and so forth. So what that symbol means is that the eagle of Zeus wants to know what Prometheus knows. So not only were we created by this positive spirit, also Prometheus knows more than Zeus and can see further than Zeus. So our creator is more knowing than the sadistic tyrant. And our creator wants to cultivate in us the same kind of forethought, the same kind of visionary creative capacity, right? In Aeschylus's writings and in various Greek texts on Prometheus, it's very clearly understood that the fire that Prometheus stole from the forge of Hephaestus and Olympus and brought to humanity is a symbol of techne. Techne meaning both craft in the sense of the arts and craft in the sense of technological science, where we get the word technology from. So it's a means of human empowerment, right?
But wouldn't you say a lot of modern technological progress is not empowering at all, and in fact it sort of clamps down on human flourishing? And so you have the American Prometheus would be Oppenheimer and created a nuclear bomb.
How do you know he didn't give us the means to defend ourselves, right? Why are these Nordics obsessed with disarming us of nuclear weapons? The only defense that we would have against such a civilization, if indeed it's lording over us, is precisely our nuclear arsenal.
So you think, but then couldn't you sort of, if you really had 360, control over the world, wouldn't you be able to sort of pit people against each other? I mean, in a world of mutually assured destruction, you end up with this kind of weird, holding pattern of geopolitics where tensions are rising, but people themselves are sort of, in these sort of Orwellian, farmhouses or something, and they're sort of withering away. And so that doesn't seem particularly empowering.
Maybe a short and quick answer to that, but then I want to answer your bigger question.
Or even information technology might be better.
I want to answer your bigger question about the misuse of technology, but just quick short answer to that one.
Yeah.
Different parts of the brain have different activities.